You are tuned into the Dr. Tyna Show with Dr. Tyna Moore. For more, visit drtyna.com. On this episode of the Dr. Tyna Show, I thought it was high time to do another State of the Union. I do these episodes every so often. There's really no timing on them. I feel like sometimes there's just really notable things happening in the world, and it's important that I document, timestamp that, and try to bring some value to the situation. We have a new president, and love him or hate him, he's here to stay for 4 years. I am very excited because it looks like freedom of speech is back on the menu. So I'm team freedom of speech, period. Whoever was coming in for that. My political stance, if you want to know, I am a moderate. I'm a really hardcore moderate, actually. I'm a libertarian. I just want to be left alone. And what I do want to share with you today in this 2025 State of the Union for the Dr. Tyna Show is that no one's coming to save you. And with that, let's jump in. All right. So back when COVID started in 2020, I made a post early on and it said, no one's coming to save you, get up. And people got so mad at me. And if you know me or you know my back history around that topic, my whole purpose on this planet during that time period was to help human beings survive the zombie apocalypse and to understand that your immune system and your health and your overall resilience was 100% contingent on how much you were willing to work on that. Now, I know there's factors we can't always control for, right? Like I got really sick with COVID, to be honest with you, but I knew I was going to get that sick, actually. My husband got really sick. He got sicker than he thought he would. He got absolutely as ill as I knew he would. But there was an extremely high survival rate surrounding that. And we weren't being told the information. And regardless of what side you stand on, we were lied to, like on a global scale. And the other thing Trump did was take us out of the World Health Organization. So booyah to that. My opinions on that are strong. We are absolutely resilient creatures, and we have basically handed over our health autonomy, and not just literally, but in our mental state as well. We are a society of people who truly believe that somebody's coming to save them when it comes to their health. And I see this all the time on my social media when I actually post about something that matters to me in my stories. The onslaught of the whataboutisms and it's always a Karen, and she's always got a strong opinion, and she's always wanting to point the finger somewhere else besides where responsibility actually lies, which is on the individual to take care of themselves. Now, I know this is probably really upsetting to some of you, and some of you are going to write me strongly worded messages in the YouTube comments, and some of you are going to unfollow me, and some of you are going to be very triggered by this. But if that's you, I really invite you to hunker down and listen to me right now and hear me out. Because I think by the end of this, you'll understand where I'm coming from, which is an absolute place of compassion and love, and truly a heart-centered desire to help humans survive the nonsense and the utter fuckery that is our healthcare system. No one's coming to save you. RFK is not going to save you. Maha is not going to save you. Trump's not going to save you. The Democrats weren't going to save you and still aren't going to save you. You're going to save you. And you're going to learn how to feed yourself well. And you're going to learn nutrition at its most basic level if you want to get through this. And then you're going to teach your kids how to do it. And that's autonomy. If you want medical autonomy, which in my definition is the right to a healthy and free body that doesn't come under the control of the government and doesn't come under the control of mandates and doesn't come under the control of fear so thick that you make poor decisions. You make decisions based on fear and distrust of your own immune system. If you want that for yourself, then if you want to trust in your immune system and what it can do, then you have to take care of it. You have to nurture it, and you have to get to know it, and you have to get to know your body, and you have to get to know what the foods you're eating are doing to you. And you have to get off these polarizing sides of nutrition. And We have to stop co-opting our health to influencers, to government officials, and to some ideation that somebody's coming to save us, because they're not. They're just not. And this has been my message since day one. I haven't changed my stance on any of this. And I wish it were so easy to point and say it's them, or those people are the bad guys, or these people are the good guys, and these people are going to save us, and this person's going to do this, and it's going to make everything okay. But if you're a smart adult, you know that that's simply not true. Heck, I think if you're a smart kid, you know that's simply not true. I mean, how old were you when you woke up and realized that your parents had no clue what they were doing, and your teachers had no idea what they were doing, and the people in charge had no idea what they were doing? I was around 14, and it was really eye-opening, and it was really, it smacked me into reality in a very just intense way. That wasn't awesome. Like, it wasn't an awesome process to go through that. But when you realize that you are responsible for you, and if you are responsible for other humans in your life, like children, for instance, then it is even more important that you take care of yourself. And then you teach your children how to feed and take care of themselves, because they are at some point are going to have to choose autonomy or to just be one of the sheeple, right? And you can't control what their choices are going to be. And so you just have to teach them well and hope for the best. And when you know better, you do better. And something that's really grated me in the past few years is this just sort of like handing out of responsibility. And we're seeing it right now in the Maha movement. And I'm not throwing shade on the Maha movement. Like, good on them. I wish them the best, and I hope that they are able to accomplish all the things that they have claimed they can, and also all the things that we've put upon them and hoped and wished for, because there's a whole lot of expectation on that right now. And I hope I truly pray and hope that those things happen. But at the end of the day, you still are going to choose what you put in your mouth. And you still are going to choose whether or not you move your body. And you still are going to choose whether or not you challenge your body with weights and, strength training and doing something hard. And you still are responsible for putting yourself to bed as an adult at the end of the day at a reasonable time. And you still are responsible for how much blue light you get. And you still are responsible for reading food labels and deciding if you're going to put those food choices into your mouth and into your body. And you still are responsible for whether you're going to get in enough time outside in the sun and hit your circadian rhythm goals and get sunlight on your skin and go for a walk outside and get fresh air. And you're still going to decide how much alcohol you consume or other things, right? Like, that's all on you at the end of the day. And there's this incredible thing happening that I knew would happen that has been so frustrating for me. Whenever I talk about, like, it's not about the fucking Fruit Loops, you guys. It's just not. And that myopic view of going after ingredients there's a couple things that is problematic here for me. Number one is it's a symptom-based approach. And in naturopathic medicine, the way that I'm trained, we don't go after symptoms. Symptoms are simply a byproduct of homeostasis gone wrong. The real problem here is ultra-refined carbohydrates. And the fact that there's foods being fed to children. One of my friends whom I love and respect very much said, yeah, but it's Tyna, we got to get the red dye out, because what about the folks that are in retirement communities, or the folks that are in prison, or the folks, the kids in schools eating school lunches? They don't have a choice. And we got to get the red dye out. And I totally agree. But also, why are we feeding these people the types of foods that would have red dye number 5? You get where I'm going here? Because only ultra refined carbohydrates are going to have red dyes in them. Only things we probably shouldn't be eating in the first place are going to have red dye in them, or not have red dye in them. But they're still going to be processed in a package. And that's probably not what we should be feeding folks who we're trying to nurture through a healthy old age in a retirement community or our children's brains. Like the inherent root cause problem here is that school lunches and prison food and retirement community food is busted at its core. And it is void of nutrients, and it is the opposite of nutritious. And it is full of not just chemicals, but ultra refined carbohydrates, which are bad news. This is akin to when I would have patients be diagnosed with gluten intolerance or even celiac disease more severely. And they would come back and say, I thought I was going to lose weight going gluten-free, or I thought I was going to even feel better. I thought my gut was going to feel better, but I don't feel any better. And I ask them what they're eating, and they're just eating a ton of super refined carbohydrates still, or they're baking a ton of gluten-free foods. They're still eating cookies and crackers and cakes and all the things and breads and all the things that are potentially not helping their microbiome, and they are wondering why they don't feel good. Well, to make something gluten-free taste yummy and squishy and have that chewiness and that nice, not taste like a hockey puck, it has to be even more refined than its non-glutinous counterpart. And so you see the problem here, right? And that's, in my opinion, what going after food colorants and chemicals in foods are. Like, how about we just stop feeding people the things that would have chemicals and food colorants in them, period. And if you're the bulk majority of the country, you do have choice. And we can talk about food deserts. I live in one. I live in a food desert completely. And we can talk about, those who don't have choices. But all in all, and I'm not discounting them, that's an incredibly small percentage of the overall population who do have choice and autonomy, right? So let's talk to the majority here, because the majority is actually the bulk of the issue. It's not the minority of this very small percentage of people who simply have no other choice but to eat terrible, horrible, crappy food. And I feel horrifically for them. That's a whole other discussion. Pulling red dye out is not going to save them when they're being fed like chemical shit storms in a package every day, all day long. Like, that's not going to help. Even if you took all of the colorants out and all of the chemicals, you're still going to be left with nutritionally void food, right? So we're treating symptoms there. We're throwing an asthma inhaler at an asthmatic. We're not curing the asthma. We're not wondering why the bronchioles are locking down, right? Root cause versus symptom-based medicine. So you see where I'm getting at. So that's a lot of effort to get these big food companies to make these changes. And I still, at the end of the day, don't think food's the real problem. We have much bigger fish to fry. And I think that politically, I understand the sort of tiptoeing in and getting society to come along for the ride and be like, oh yeah, we see the problems. And oh, here's some other problems. Like, we can't red pill everybody all at once. I get that. I realized I was red pilled a long time ago, long before COVID, decades. And I know that some of you woke up during COVID. And I know that some of you woke up a few years later when you were starting to have issues after the, mandated intervention. I get all of that. And I know we can't get everybody all there together at the same time, but it's been a really interesting ride for me because my message has never changed, which is you are responsible for your own well-being and no one's coming to save you. And I've said this on multiple podcasts. I've said this pretty much every opportunity I can get. GLP-1s aren't going to save you. You may have found me through that conversation. They're not going to save you. They're just a tool in the toolbox. And now I'm getting messages from people who didn't listen to me and they only used that tool. That was the only tool they used. That was the only hammer they implemented. And now what's happening to them is exactly what I knew would happen and what I warned of. And they don't know where to go with it, right? They're stuck. They're at a dose that's too high. They're getting resistance. It's not working as well anymore. They don't know what to do. And I truly mean it when I say that health is a multifactorial approach, but the onus of responsibility still is on you. You still have to do the foundational work yourself. Someone cannot do that for you. Not the best doctor in the world, not the food industry, not big pharma. There's no version of this where you don't have to do the work. And we want to kind of co-opt that out to somebody else. And what I see happening, back to what I was saying with the Fruit Loops conversation, is every time I mention it, somebody or multiple people actually have to come in and be like, well, we have to start somewhere, Dr. Tyna, or there's food deserts, Dr. Tyna, or people don't know better, Dr. Tyna. And that is such an incredibly disempowering viewpoint. I cannot believe the people who say people don't know better. Like, that baffles me. I spent years working in very low income community clinics when I was a student in medical school, because we had to get a certain amount of hours and we had to get a certain amount of checkoffs. Like, we had to, for instance, we had to see somebody with bronchitis, or we had to maybe do a procedure. There was all kinds of things that were required before we could graduate. And so you more likely were going to see some of those opportunities in the community clinics. And I really grew to love the community clinics. And I'll tell you why. It's because these were people who really didn't have a lot of resources and they didn't have a lot of money. And so when you told them that they needed to go back to their diet and nutrition and cook at home, they listened. In fact, they listened more than the rich people did at the other clinics, and more than the rich people did at the clinics I was precepting at, or that I had spent time. I spent well over, decades working with my mentor in a very high-end clinic. And it was like pulling teeth to get some of these people to take action. But when somebody is really low income and doesn't have a lot of options and can't afford a bunch of fancy supplements and can't afford a bunch of biohacking, whatever, they go to food. And they listen. And when you tell them, I need you to cook an anti-inflammatory diet for the next 6 weeks and be strict about it because your rheumatoid arthritis is through the roof, they listen, right? And they implement. And we don't give people enough credit. And in fact, I have found that those of ethnic background whose parents or maybe grandparents were like first generation in America from another country, immigrants, those people listen the best because they are closer to folk medicine. They're closer to herbal medicine. They remember what their grandmas told them on how to take care of things, right? When you don't have a ton of all the resources and a ton of this modern allopathic system to just pick and choose from, they had to rely on more traditional alternative medications or options, I should say, like herbs, like nutrition. Like, their grandmas knew what's up. My grandma knew what was up. My great grandma really knew what was up. And my mom's handed that information down to me. And I'm hoping that some of you have had that information handed down to you, but somewhere a lot of us have forgotten, and then we want to blame. And so I get called tone deaf, I get called elitist, I get called all kinds of things every time I try to bring this up, because people say, well, you just don't understand. But I do understand, and I shouldn't have to qualify that. I've been very, 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 very broke. And I have also worked with people who were very, very, very broke. And I have an incredible amount of empathy and compassion for all types of human beings. And I just want to see everybody survive and win. And when you realize that no one's coming to save you and the onus of responsibility is ultimately on you, it's incredibly empowering. It's an incredibly empowering space to step into. It is a container that is limitless when you suddenly understand that the game is yours to play and it is your responsibility to take care of yourself at the end of the day. I cannot force my daughter to eat the way I want her to. I cannot force my husband to eat the way I want him to. I can only guide them, but I can control what I put in my mouth, and I can choose what I put in my mouth. And I have gotten to a point over the years, and it's not that hard to do. It just takes practice and some hunkering down. I have gotten to a place where I could choose not to eat if I needed to skip the garbage that's being presented to me. If the only option is garbage because I'm traveling or whatever, and it's food that's highly processed and it's going to make me feel lousy, I can choose not to eat that, right? And I'm not going to die. Like, you're not going to die. Most of us have a little bit of wiggle room and some adipose stores to go off of, right? So it's getting to that point. I also understand through this journey of researching and diving into the GLP-1 conversation over the past year and a half or so, is that we're not all having the same signals in the brain. And so we're not all getting the same hunger signals or satiety signals. And so I know that some of you listening are ravenous all the time because that signaling pathway is compromised, whether it's your leptin or ghrelin or GLP-1 or adiponectin or whatever it is, there's a compromise somewhere and something is not firing or being received the way it should be. And we have, problems. And so I know that some of you have lower appetite and some of you have incredibly high appetites. I respect all of that. I know that some of you have lower levels of education around these topics, and I know some of you have extremely high levels. In fact, some of my followers are smarter than most of the doctors I know. I get it. I try to speak to all of you in sincerity. But the information is out there, and there's never been a time in history where the information was so easily accessed at our fingertips. It's a matter of discipline to sit down and look at it and read it and learn it. I know it can be confusing, and I know there's a sea of information out there, and we can get caught up in our gurus, right? Well, she says this and he says this, and I just don't know what to believe. People say that to me. Grown adults say that to me. And I always push back and say, well, you're a grown adult, so you can make a choice. And sometimes they get really mad, and other times they say, you know what, thank you. Or they'll ask me a question, and I'm like, gee, I don't know. I reshared someone's post, so I didn't write the post, and I didn't read the study that was attached to that post. I just reshared the post, and they'll say, well, what about this in the study? Like, what about this? Did they look at this in the study? And I'm like, I don't know. Maybe you should click on it and go read it and look at it, right? Give yourself that permission, and give yourself permission to be a beginner at it. And it's okay. Like, you don't have to know how to read studies, but you can click on it, and then you can, once you have it open, you can search for the word that you're looking for and see if it's in there. I mean, you could run it through ChatGPT and ask it. There's different ways of going about acquiring knowledge, but it's never been easier. And so one of my missions on this planet also is to help you guys empower yourselves to go look for the information that you seek. Don't just ask me, and certainly don't just believe me. Here's how I go about it. I see something, I think, that's interesting, and I immediately go Google it. I get off the app. I might even screenshot it so I have it. I get off the app and I go look it up. And if there's no study there, I go find it. I don't ask the person's source, because like 99% of the time when people ask for source, the sources, they're not even, you can't hyperlink in Instagram anyway. So there's no way to like click on it. And most people aren't going to go read it. Like 99.9% of people are not going to go read it. So that said, I want you to give yourself the opportunity in 2025 to be more curious and to learn how to go look for things. Don't ask questions that you can easily answer. And as my mentor would always say to me, when I would ask him a question, he would write back and text and say, did you fucking Google it? And, you know, I get where he was coming from. He didn't want me to ask him a question I could find through the Google, because, you know, who's got time for that nonsense? But also, I would never have bugged him unless it was like a last ditch resort and I had already tried to Google it, right? But now we even have Google AI assistants that sort of like synthesizes all the studies and gives you this perfect little paragraph. So there's really not a lot of excuses for those who say, I just don't buy that argument of, oh, people just don't know. I just don't buy that argument. I think a better way to phrase that is people are lazy. So don't be lazy. This is your health. I'm not pointing the finger at you, and I'm not trying to piss you off. I'm getting you to understand that you need to step into your power and not be lazy when it comes to your health. Because trust me, we can maha all day, but there are way bigger forces at work that are all colluding and have been for decades. And they are big food, big pharma, big ag are all in bed with each other. And they dump a lot of money into the government through lobbyists, through special interests. Just go look up all the senators and political people in your state and go look who funds them. People who you've seen fight back against the you-know-what intervention of 2021 are being paid by the companies who made it. I mean, I can't make this stuff up. You just have to go look. So there are huge, powerful forces at work on a global level that really want to keep the diabetes industrial complex, the cancer industrial complex, the chronic illness industrial complex alive and well, particularly the United States. It seems like we were the testing ground for all of this going back to the 90s. And I have been well aware of this for a long time, you guys, decades. I don't think, the awesome team that RFK and Trump has put together to combat this is going to even be able to put a dent in some of what we are up against. So, and I'm not trying to take hope away. I think they're going to do some really great, fantastic work as well along the way. But this is a huge problem. This isn't a 4-year, even if all the reins were off, like they had full rein and they like all of the brakes were off and they were able to do whatever it is they needed to get done. They still couldn't get it done in 4 years. So that said, this goes back to the onus of responsibility being on you. It's your responsibility to feed yourself nutritionally dense food every single day. It's your responsibility to feed your children that. I did a cost comparison inside ChatGPT, and I compared grocery store meals with takeout, like fast food takeout, and also like restaurant takeout, like Thai food, or, like we have a lot of Thai food here in Portland area. So, like pizza, stuff like that, like real food, a little bit, more so than fast food, but still not something you want to be eating every day, probably really heavy in the seed oils and maybe not all the best ingredients. And then I compared that again to cooking at home. And I compared that also to if you had it DoorDashed or like Uber Eats or delivered to you. And if you are cooking at home versus eating out at fast food, you're spending like almost 3 to 4 times as much on fast food. So I don't want to hear that argument either. This whole argument of like, oh, it's cheaper to eat at McDonald's than it is to cook at home. Bullshit. I just call bullshit on that. Just like I just called bullshit on people not knowing better. When the information is literally at the tips of their fingers, they just need to go look for it and synthesize it. I also call bullshit on the fact that when people know better, people will argue with me and say, oh, well, people have said this to me. Tyna, people are dumb, and so we have to tell them what to do. Like, really? That's bewildering to me. That is really disempowering. And I do think a lot of humans are pretty dumb. But I also know that when you tell people how to do something or explain it to them in a way that makes sense to them to do better, they generally want to save their own asses. And so they really will try to eat better and take better care of themselves. Not every time. And it was a constant frustration in my clinical practice. And one of the many reasons why I left clinical practice in my big clinic, because people, you can lead a horse to water. I only have so many cheerleading years left in my spirit before I just get fed up. And I'm like, why are we wasting everyone's time if these people aren't going to actually take the advice I'm spending the time giving them? I give it to you guys for free and you can do with it what you want. You can tell me to stick it up my rear if you want. I don't care because I know what the truth is. And I know that at the end of the day, this vessel is 100% my responsibility. And the choices I made 20 years ago are probably going to kick me in the ass still, or currently are. I know that, there's a lot more I could be doing to take care of my health. I know that I do a pretty damn good job, and I'm probably doing better than most of the people my age on the day-to-day. I know that it's a job. It requires a lot of time and effort. I know all these things. I know how hard it is to be broke and be in bankruptcy and still have to feed yourself well. I know how hard it is to work 80 to 90, 100 hours a week with no help and support and be a single mom and still have to feed yourself well and take care of yourself. I know that there's not all the time in the world for people to do all the things every day. I know that an elaborate morning routine is ridiculous for most people and not realistic. I know that an elaborate self-care routine is ridiculous and not realistic for most people. I know that it's easy to look at folks on the internet and say, oh, well, they've got it made. I should just do what they're doing. And so I'm just going to do whatever they say. I know that seems easier, but again, you're just co-opting responsibility off to somebody else. I know it's really easy to point a finger and say, well, I hear this one a lot. It's Big Food's fault. If RFK could just get the chemicals out of the food. And I'm like, you still shouldn't feed your kids Fruit Loops. Like, we still shouldn't be eating so much of this garbage that they call food, right? The majority of the grocery store is just garbage. Go in the grocery store. I did this the other day. I looked the entire aisle for 1.5. This is a big grocery store in Florida. 1.5 whole sides of this long aisle in this big grocery store was soda. And then one aisle over, the whole one side was cereal. Like, all of this is not edible food. None of that I would consider things that you should put in your mouth, right? And I'm not here lecturing. I'm just telling you, like, I know we're up against it. I know we're up against this. It seems just crazy, but like, don't bring it home. Don't let your kids have it. If they throw a fit, too bad. they can't afford it to go buy it themselves, then they're not eating it, right? Like, you have to make the choices and you have to stand your ground, especially you mamas. I'm talking to you. This is hard. I know you're up against your partners, your husbands, your kids. I know everybody's complaining. I saw this a lot with patients. They would have to eat a certain way in order to get their autoimmune disease under control. And then the husband wouldn't be down with it and the kids wouldn't be down with it. And I had women making 3 different types of dinner at dinner time. One for the kids, one for the husband, one for themselves. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Like, take a stand and say, no, we're cooking this. And if you don't eat it, you don't eat. That's how I grew up. I don't know where we lost that. That's how a lot of people in my generation grew up. If you are Gen X, you grew up that way too, probably. But for some reason, we just tiptoe around kids today. And we're like, well, I know it's hard and they want to go to parties and what are they being exposed to at school? Don't feed them school lunch. Make them something at home. I promise you guys, I realize that in some cases that a home cooked lunch or a home prepared lunch is going to be more expensive than a school lunch. But I promise you that what they're feeding them at school is not food. It's just garbage. Like, it's literally garbage. And so then what's happening is we have kids with behavioral issues and with health issues and with all kinds of issues that seemingly have a pharmaceutical intervention, right? And nobody's looking at the fact that, like, you slapping together peanut butter and jelly on white bread is still better than 99% of the garbage they're being fed in the school lunches, because our school lunch program is atrocious. That's my opinion. It was atrocious when my daughter was a student. It was atrocious when I was a student. I cannot imagine it's gotten better. It's probably gotten worse. I haven't been in an elementary school in a long time, though, so I couldn't tell you exactly. But man, most of what they tried to feed me was garbage. And it certainly was garbage what they were trying to feed my daughter. So all this to say, again, we can maha all day. We can talk about what's most important. We can spend tax dollars trying to get red dye number 40 out. That seems like a moot point to me. I'm just being honest. I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus. I'm not trying to take any wind out of anybody's sails. I know people are excited about MAHA. There are much bigger things that I think that organization needs to be focusing on that are really big issues that have very little to do with whether or not your Fruit Loops has natural colorants or artificial colorants. Like, just don't eat the Fruit Loops. Make it easy, right? Let's not support Kellogg's. Let's just not support Procter & Gamble and some of these other big companies. Like, that's an easier thing to do. Just choose with your dollars, vote with your dollars, right? And then the other things that we need to prioritize, which I think are the real issues, and I've talked about this before, is physical fitness. And so it is contingent on you implementing a physical fitness routine on the regular so that you not only are stronger and more resilient, but that your children see you being stronger and more resilient and they can model that behavior. And you are a better partner, wife, husband, better employee or employer. You are a better citizen in the world because you are taking less from the pot of limited resources called our tax-funded medical system, or I don't even know how it works anymore. It's so convoluted and horrific. It's costing us a lot of money, all of us. It's costing us all a lot for how sick everybody is. And so I firmly believe it is my responsibility as a citizen in this community to be the healthiest and take the least amount necessary of resources that are limited and finite. I don't need them because I take really good care of myself. So I'll invest my time and my dollars a different way to ensure that I am healthier and stronger and more resilient so that I am never a suck on the system. I'm never a suck on my husband. I don't want to be a suck on my family. I don't want to suck on anybody's energy, resources, or finances because I'm too sick to take care of myself. Because I've been there. I've been that kid. And you guys have heard me talk about this, so I won't belabor it. But it sucks. It really sucks to be that person. And they're not going to take you with them when the zombie apocalypse hits. If you can't get up and go and be an actual productive part of that group, they're not taking you with them when the zombie apocalypse hits. I don't know how else to say it. So I think about this stuff. I think about this stuff every day and how can I be contributing and really a valuable person in the group. Any group I'm in, how can I bring value and be of service there? Whether it's my ideas, whether it's my physical acumen or if it's just simply not being a suck on them. Take this to heart. If this is triggering you or upsetting you, please listen, take it to heart. You don't need to be that person. You don't need to be. You can do a lot about this, and you should do something about it, right? If you're finding yourself in that situation. I posted a few weeks ago on my Instagram some basic strength goals. And basically at the end of the day, I said, if you can't do a good solid pull-up, what are you going to do? What if you have to run away? What if you have to hustle away from danger and you have to climb a wall or a fence? And I talked about this on there before the Los Angeles fires, but I'm betting you money there were people, so unfortunately, in that situation who probably did have to hustle and had to probably climb to safety somewhere. And I always think, I better be able to get my butt up that fence or that wall or scramble up that little cliffside, right? Because why? I do not want the responsibility to be on my husband to go in front of me and have to pull me up. I don't want to be reliant on that. That's just not acceptable to me. I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be the reason somebody else maybe gets hurt or is compromised because I can't get myself out of a dangerous situation because I'm not physically fit enough. And then I'm reliant on them to do it, and that holds them up. Or maybe there is somebody who is younger or more weak because they're elderly or they're a child and they need that attention and help. And what if, God forbid, something happens to them because I'm over here taking up resources of somebody else's strength because I'm not strong enough to get myself to a safe situation? I think about this stuff, and I don't want to be that person. So I encourage you to also consider that you don't need to be that person either. And you absolutely should not be if you have control and you have utility in your body. A lot of you are so much stronger than you realize. Even now, even currently, you may feel incredibly out of shape or incredibly deconditioned. You haven't been doing much, if ever, and you don't think about this stuff, but you're probably really, really much stronger than you think. And so you can hone that. And that is a very exciting place to be, because once you start honing it, you have some purpose and you have some goals, and that's incredibly empowering. And we need more people. I'm so tired of looking at deconditioned little skinny women with no muscle mass saying it's all about food or it's all about toxins. We no diss on the crunchy granola mama scene, but you also have to have some muscle mass and some good physical fitness to be able to talk about this stuff. You have to be the whole picture, right? This isn't just about the food. It's not just about getting red dye number 3 and number 40 out. Actually, red dye number 40, from what I understand, is also known as red dye number 5. But I can't seem to make sense of that when I look into it. No, no, it's not just about the food. We're also being massively poisoned, in my opinion, with artificial light. And we're missing the boat on that. Thank God. I think we're bringing incandescence back. I think we're getting freedom of speech and incandescent bulbs back. I'll vote for that. Taking us into an LED-only society is a terrible idea for our health with the amount of blue light that is emitted from those bulbs. And that's another thing people don't know about. I don't know why people don't know about that. I've known about that for a really long time. It's not because somebody told me in school or in my medical training. It's because it was something I was interested in. I don't want to be poisoned by artificial lights and blue light if I can help it. And in that, putting as many full spectrum incandescent bulbs in my home has always been a goal. Since my daughter was a baby, that's been a massive goal. I remember being so broke, I couldn't afford the full spectrum. And now we can't even get incandescents because the Biden administration took them away in 2023. It's crazy. So I stocked up. I bought $1,000 worth of light bulbs from Amazon. August 2023, I think, was when that went in effect. And I remember in July, stockpiling light bulbs. I got a shipment the other day of 4 red light bulbs, incandescent. And to my knowledge, they were the only 4 I could find on the internet. I searched and searched and searched, and it kept bringing me back to this one option on Amazon to buy these 4. They only had 4 left, 4 light bulbs. And I bought them, all 4. And I remember getting them just the other day thinking, oh my God, Is this the last of the incandescent bulbs that I have ever purchased? Like, I can't live in this world. I can't accept that. I got to move to a different country. I mean, these were all the thoughts going through my head. And then yesterday, I think we're getting incandescent bulbs back based on some of the verbiage in one of the presidential signatures that went out. So anyway, these are all important things. And I realize it's a lot. I want to try to make it easier for you. I think that a great place to start is to make sure that you are eating nutritionally dense foods and making a goal of trying to eat the bulk of your foods at home. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm not perfect. I'm not claiming to be. I'm not pointing any fingers at anyone. I think that the goal should be to eat most of your meals at home. Start there. That is a huge undertaking for many of you. I know it was for me. I was absolutely like, that just seemed unfathomable to me. Even a few years ago, I was traveling so much for work, eating most of your meals at home when you can. We just were in Florida for an event, and we were fortunate enough to be able to upgrade to a room with a kitchen, which we did. So we were able to have a lot of our meals in the kitchen. So when you travel, trying to find places where you can maybe order some Instacart groceries or head to the local grocery store if you can, even on your Uber ride from the airport, making those types of things priority so that you have food in your refrigerator and you can try to make the best of it, right? In those situations, there's all kinds of ways to do this. It takes some forethought. Something else you can do is prepare your food ahead of time and carry it on the plane with you. There's ways around this. People just have to actually take the time and energy to do it. I know it's not the easiest thing in the world, but it is absolutely doable. So start there. The second thing is light deprivation. Take it seriously. We're being severely light deprived here in Oregon. I saw I can't remember his name, a doctor on Instagram who is a sleep expert. And he was talking about how daylight savings time, they were trying to pass a bill about making daylight savings time permanent. And he was arguing that standard time should actually be what's permanent. And we shouldn't even have transient daylight savings time, which I agree with. But he was showing that if you lived where I live in the Pacific Northwest, if we had full-time permanent daylight savings time, we wouldn't even, for many months, we wouldn't even get sunrise until like 9 or 10 a.m. I mean, that just sounds awful. And then he showed a graph of how those of us in the Oregon, Seattle area are, Washington, Seattle, Portland, Oregon area are getting 8 hours less of daylight than we do in the summer. And I wonder why I'm depressed every winter. And I mean, 8 hours less of daylight than I do in the summertime. That's crazy. So prioritizing light. I've got a red light this is my cell phone, but I have a red light that's this big, and it was a couple $100. And that is something that I travel with and I have a big red light bed that I use, right? And that was a lot more. There are ways that we can go about getting the light that we need, at least part of the spectrum that we need. It doesn't have to be a big, fancy, expensive, setup. It can be something less expensive, but most importantly, getting that light in your eyes in the morning and making sure, and there's even these, the 10,000 lux happy lamps, I call them, that you can get off Amazon that are not terribly expensive either. And I sit with a red light on and I sit with that thing on in the morning to make sure that I'm getting adequate light in my eyes when I wake up so that my circadian rhythm is more normal and less of this chronic darkness. You can go for walks every day, whether that's on a treadmill and you have to buy a $20 Planet Fitness membership, or you can walk around your area. Many of you live in places where there's sidewalks. I know that's not always safe. I know that some people live in the inner city, and I've heard all of this from you guys, and I totally get it. We got to sort it out though, because we just do. Like, again, no one's coming to save you. I think another really important thing that we can do is understand that the bulk of the food that comes from the grocery store is not our friend. If it's not a whole food that came from the perimeter of the store and looks like how God made it, or how it came off the farm, or, has only just a few ingredients, I think those are the foods we should be eating, right? And that there's no need to argue that. We can find those foods. Even in my food desert, there are still better food options inside that establishment of that little mini mart than there are, than some of the terrible food choices that are in there. So just consistently making those food choices. That's what it is. It's food choices. And so I think even the most uneducated person could tell you that a apple or a whole piece of fruit or vegetable is more healthy than, some brightly colored packaged sweet ho-ho thing. I don't even know what's out there anymore. We had like ding dongs and ho-hos when I was a kid, but you know what I'm saying? We have to make those choices and we have to educate our kids on it. But I remember being a kid and eating some of these things and absolutely knowing they were not good for me versus the chicken breast and broccoli that my mom made for dinner, right? Like this isn't rocket science. And so I really want to emphasize that we have to stop treating other people as if they're too stupid to understand this. It is so disempowering. The arguments I hear people making on my Instagram to protect these less fortunate souls is so degrading. It's so degrading to assume that somebody is incompetent of identifying healthy foods. We are human beings, for God's sakes. We are mammals. We have instincts. We're not so completely disconnected from reality that we can't make a decision about the foods that we see in front of us. Like, it's asinine to me that people actually assume that humans don't have that instinctual ability. My dog knows garbage from good, healthy food. Like, this isn't a conspiracy and this isn't some elitist standpoint and I'm standing on my high horse here. Like, we have to stop treating people like they're stupid and incompetent because they're not. And I have worked with so many people of so many different socioeconomic backgrounds and nobody's stupid. Some people are just making worse or better choices than others, right? When it comes to exercise, I don't know if people understand the true value of exercise. And so it's constantly looked at as a chore, but I just want you to rephrase that in your head and reframe it as, this is non-negotiable. These are the things that I need to do if I want to be resilient. Because if you're not resilient, what happens is the latest scare of upper respiratory, whatever comes around, people freak out, and then they delegate the responsibility of their health choices out to whomever. And they don't trust their bodies. They don't trust their immune system. And I think that's a really tragic place to be. And it breaks my heart when I see people be so scared that they have absolutely no trust in their God-given, amazing immune system. We have so much data to support that natural immunity was far superior to anything else that came along during the past few years when it comes to the, C word that we're not allowed to speak of. And it just was heartbreaking to me to watch humans argue that, because let's make basic sciences great again, right? Like, let's just bring back common sense around basic sciences. We have these beautiful, intricate, God-given, I don't even know. Like, if you don't believe in God, study immunology, study physiology, and you'll be, it's just bewildering how well ran our bodies are when we give it what it needs. It's miraculous. And we treat it like total garbage. We poison it. And then we fill it full of pharmaceuticals and interventions and have no trust in it to carry us through when we need it. And I'm not saying don't do the things that you feel like you need to do to feel safe. Like, whatever you need to do. I think at the end of the day, there are consequences to every action, even the most beautiful things that I talk about and promote. You can take too much vitamin D. You can take too much GLP-1. You can do too much of something and have consequences to those actions. But utilizing the beauty of the tools that we have from nature, and then making sure that we educate ourselves on other opportunities that might be helpful. And this is where some of these interventions come in, right? Like, I'm not dissing all pharmaceuticals. I think there is a place for many of them. And especially when we start talking about doing more personalized dosing strategies with them. I've had wonderful outcomes for patients that were life-changing with the use of things like low-dose naltrexone and, microdoses of GLP-1s, and even some very low doses of different hormones, depending on where the individual was at. I've talked about this on many podcasts. This is how I do things. And so I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I'm not a purist. It doesn't have to all be nature. People say, well, it's it didn't come from nature, so therefore it's poison. And I'm like, well, why did God give the human the idea then to come up with it, right? So not everything's evil, and we just need to know how to use things. And the dose makes the poison in a lot of circumstances, even in health foods, right? I mean, I ate too much fiber the other day and my stomach was not happy. So, right, the dose makes the poison there. I just want to put that out there because your instincts matter and they're on. And the more you take care of yourself, the better your instincts become and the better the choices you make. And the more you trust yourself and the more you trust your immune system and the more you trust your body and the more you listen to your body, the more you get to know your body. And you can't really make great choices about your health if you don't inhabit your body and really understand it. And so I just want to invite you in 2025 to stop listening to all of it and just hunker down. And that might take some meditation. I really firmly believe that through physical exercise that we get to know our bodies so well, like through challenging our bodies, through sweating, through being in our body and pushing our bodies physically is how we really ground into our bodies and feel our bodies. And maybe it's yoga, maybe, some kind of movement, maybe it's dance, maybe it's hula hooping, maybe it's roller skating. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to express your body through movement. And that is how you get to know your body and you start to listen to it and talk to it and get to know it better. Because what I want for all of us is to stop thinking that there's some political figure that's going to come in and wave a magic wand or sign some kind of magical paper that is going to save everybody, because it's not going to happen. And I'm seeing so many people right now, myself included. I'm excited. I'm excited for some of the changes. Do I expect something terribly different? I don't know. Again, I'm a moderate. I'm a libertarian. I pretty much think these are like two wings of the same bird. So do with that what you will and be mad at me if you want. That's my opinion. But, and I think we're going to have some backlash from the last 4 years. I think, things swing. So I think we saw, the extreme swing into progressivism was a reaction to the 4 years, under Trump. And then we're going to see this swing back into conservatism. And it's just how cycles go, right? But at the end of the day, no one's coming to save you. And the onus of responsibility for your health is ultimately on you. Doctors are here to help. Health practitioners are here to help and guide. We're here to cheer you on. We're here to tell you how to get from A to B faster and more efficiently, hopefully, if we're good doctors and we're good healthcare practitioners. But ultimately, you have to do the work. And that is a really hard pill for a lot of people to swallow. And I'll end with this. I got myself into chronic autoimmune flares and into immunocompromise. I got myself there. Did I deserve it? No. Did I make some horrendous choices for a really long period of time? Yes. Do I regret it? Yes. Can I do anything about it? Absolutely. Can I fix it all? Probably not. I'm okay with that. I had to come to terms with some of the damage I've done to myself, right? I was a smoker and I smoked a pack a day for 10 years in high school into college. Like, what a disaster. Drank like a fish, was a mac and cheese-atarian, ate terribly. I mean, it's funny because my friends from college see what I'm doing now and they're like, how did you end up here? You were a train wreck of health. I'm like, yeah, I know. It's ironic. So I know what the build back feels like. And for those of you who've been with me a long time, you've heard me say this so many times. And none of this is probably any new news, but maybe it's just something to help set you straight or get you back in line, right? So we're gonna finish it up. We all have to take responsibility for every single choice we make, whether that's I put myself to bed too late last night, whether it's I ate something I shouldn't have because now I feel terrible, or whether it's, you had one too many glasses of wine and your rosacea freaked out for 3 days. Like, these are all real things, right? And the tolerance bands on your health get shorter and tighter as you get older. So the ability to really swing out of it and rebound from self-destructive behavior, which is ultimately what it is, right? A lot of us are using self-destructive behavior on the regular through our food choices or through our lack of exercise or through any kind of self-depreciating processes we're putting ourselves through because we don't feel like we deserve it. Whatever that may be, I want to invite you in 2025 to step into your power and start to look at those things. I have a free challenge for you. We have postponed it until February because of the fires in Los Angeles. It was just tone deaf of me to continue to try to launch this. So we're going to be doing it in early February. I hope you will join us. It's absolutely free. It's 21 days of great tips and tricks from me to get you in line and get you on the path. So how do you get there? drtyna.com, drtyna.com/strength and resilience. That'll get you to the page. You share your name and email with me. That will get you on the wait list. And I promise to notify you first when this kicks off. It'll be 21 days long. You'll have access to it for about 30 days, and then it will disappear. So you got to do it with us if you want to take advantage of it. And there's going to be 21 days of really phenomenal tips and tricks in there. I'm going to teach you what your strength goals should be so that you have some kind of goal to work towards. I'm going to teach you the basics of metabolic health, many of the things you hear me talk about, but we're going to just do it in a more organized fashion. And I'm going to give you actual steps and homework to do each day to get you on the path so that you have a starting place. Think of it like the 75 hard, except it's the 21 modified reasonable, because I know that 75 hard is really out of reach for a lot of people. So let's do this together. Let's make sure that we are working each day on implementing a new strategy to improve our health overall, because it takes 21 days to develop a new habit. And so we're going to do it in 21 days. It's drtyna.com/strength and resilience. And I want you to go sign up and join now, and you will be notified with an email when it starts. And I promise you, you will get a ton of value out of it. Lastly, I think it's important for us to remember who we were. And so something I would share with patients when they were on the journey back to health, and sometimes it was a heavy journey, because I know sometimes we end up moving into a house full of mold, or we get exposed to something, or there's things just absolutely out of our control. It is still the onus of responsibility to get yourself back to baseline. And I know that's hard because I've been there. I've absolutely been there. But it is still your responsibility to get yourself back to baseline and do the work that it takes to get you back there. So find a picture of yourself when you felt your strongest, not when you were your skinniest, not when you thought, oh my gosh, I looked so good, but I was like, starving myself to death and smoking cigarettes and, staying up all night. Not those pictures. Find a picture where you felt strong and you felt healthy and you felt resilient. Put that on your refrigerator, or put it on your makeup vanity. Put it somewhere where you're going to see it, maybe on your dresser when you're getting ready. Remind yourself of who you were, because maybe you were very young when it happened. Maybe it's a picture from childhood. Who knows? And I understand not all of us had a super happy childhood, and not all of us maybe even have a picture where we feel like we were on top of the world. Maybe we have never been on top of the world, but there is a time and place where you felt well enough that it was better than you feel now. And I want you to put that picture somewhere to remind yourself. Go dig it up, find it, put it somewhere where you can see it. And look back and talk to that person, because you've been there. You can get back there. And maybe you just want to lose 5 pounds or 10 pounds. Maybe you're in a whole heap of, health issues. We have to start somewhere. So we're going to do it over 21 days. You're going to join my free challenge if you want, and take advantage of it. And we're going to do it together. So with that, I will bid you adieu. Remember, doesn't matter who's in office, doesn't matter how many presidential proclamations are signed, doesn't matter how hard we maha, doesn't matter how many food colorants and chemicals we take out of the ultra-refined carbohydrates. We shouldn't be eating the ultra-refined carbohydrates, guys. It doesn't matter how many health influencers are joining everybody in Washington, D.C., and how big of a excitement we have over this. It still comes down to the choices you make day in and day out in your own body, in your own health. And then, do you help educate the people around you, or lead by example, or both? That's how you take back your medical autonomy, because no one's coming to save you. And with that, I will bid you adieu. Thanks for listening to the Dr. Tyna Show. This is a Wellness Loud production produced by Drake Peterson and mixed by Mike Fry. Theme song is by John the Guilt. You can watch the full video version of this podcast inside the Spotify app or on YouTube. As always, you can email the podcast at podcast@drtyna.com. That's DRTYNA. And if you like this episode, please rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. You can also find all of my offerings on my website at drtyna.com. For more shows by my team, go to wellnessloud.com. See you next time, and thanks for listening. This podcast is for general informational purposes only. It does not constitute the practices of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice. I am a doctor, but I am not your doctor. No doctor-patient relationship is formed. The use of this information and the materials linked to this podcast is at the user's own risk. The content on this podcast is intended not to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice from any medical condition they have, and they should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions.